Continuation with installation of drywall. This is module 4. We're going to be looking at the application of gypsum board. And so the objective, after going through this, we're going to be able to look at the thickness and the types of drywall required for specific installation. So we're going to select the type of fasteners for drywall installation, explain the fastener schedules for different types of drywall installation, and then we're going to perform single layer and multi-layer drywall installation using different types of fastener systems, including nails and drywall screws. Gypsum board panels can be applied over any film, flat base such as wood or steel framing and furring strips. And gypsum can also be applied to masonry and concrete surfaces. It can be laid right on top of it, or you can use furring strips to attach it. To join, so a joint is any point where two drywall panels meet. So again, it could be two taper edges where it's finished off at, or it could be the two butt ends where it is unfinished, where you can still be able to join them together, but be able to finish it off. Single-ply gypsum board systems are used in light commercial and residential construction. Multi-ply systems have two or more layers of gypsum boards to increase sound isolation and also for fire-resistant performance. Again, as you look at this diagram, we see that those multiple panels on the wall where they are screwed or nailed to the wall. Again, it starts at the ceiling, work their way down to the floor. Of course, any gaps underneath the floor, because we don't want to ever install drywall flat on the floor. We have a slight gap underneath it, usually about a ½ inch, but we use baseboard to finish off the appearance of drywall. Single ply or multi-ply assemblies will produce good results by requiring, number one, the framing. Proper framing details consisting of straight, correctly spaced, and proper cured lumber. If you're putting green lumber in, you're going to warp. And if it's warped, it's going to cause problems with that drywall because it can pull the nails or the screws out. It can cause joints to crack. So a proper job conditions, including controlled temperatures and adequate ventilation during application. So if you're doing drywall in the wintertime, there should be heat in the building because number one, is you try to, the drywall number one will expand and contract. And if the temperature was too high or too low and you end up finishing the wall, once it gets to a normal temperature, it can change in its ability to be able to hold the nails or be able to the seams in place. So proper measuring, cutting, and aligning and fastening the board is important. Putting the correct number of screws to hold the panel. Making sure you cut it straight without leaving large gaps or it's too tight and where it can expand and end up again cracking a seam. So proper joint and fasteners treatment and special requirements for proper sound isolation, fire resistance, thermal properties, and moisture resistance is all need to be considered. So conditions like temperature, humidity affect the performance of and appearance of the joints. And adhesive materials, ability to develop an adequate bond. Because a lot of times we use some type of construction adhesive to mount it on the studs to help the drywall to be secured. Yes, we're still going to use nails, or screws, but to keep it stable, many times we will use some type of adhesive. So it is important to keep the materials dry and stored properly. Again, we stack it neatly. We don't keep it out in the weather because, again, it can absorb moisture and it can start build mold on it. So again, keeping it dry, keep it in a proper temperature. So when it comes to cutting and fitting procedures, so again, that's why we use a T-square and use a utility knife and use a rasp to clean up the edges. So you have very consistent cuts and fittings. So accurate measuring and cutting and fitting is important with gypsum board. Some practice that should be followed to ensure proper installation includes um, install the ceiling boards first, then the wall panels starting up high. Panels should fit easily into place without force because it can buckle if it expands. Always match edges and ends. In other words, if you got two taper edges, they should go together, or you got two butt ends, that should go together. It's designed that way. Plan to span the entire length of the ceiling or walls with a single board if you can. It cuts down on seams to reduce the number of end joints or butt joints. Staggered end joints and locate them as far from the center of the ceiling or wall as possible. In other words, many times we start out by putting a half sheet up first, and then we put a full sheet, because then the next row will have only a full sheet, so we don't have it won't be easily to detect where a seam is at. So again, other things to consider in a single ply application, the board ends and edges parallel to the supporting members, which is the studs, the framing, or the joists, if it's on a ceiling, should fall on these members to reinforce the joint. So in other words, you should never have a seam in the middle of a support. I mean, between the space between the support. It should land on that stud or that joist. One of the two. It should never be a seam between the space. Never. Mechanical and electrical equipment such as cover plates, registers, and grills should be installed to provide for the final wall thickness when applying the trim. So here's what they're saying here is that you will consider anything else that going into the wall. If there's a ventilation damper or a register or a grill, or there's electrical covers. We make sure that we are installing the things in the wall correctly, so there's no imperfections when you're finishing the wall. Place a shim under the wallboard to keep it from absorbing moisture from the floor. So usually when I bring drywall into a room to store it, I would set something down. I usually lay some cut off pieces of 2x4 to put it on the floor so it's never touching the floor, and plus there's air gaps between it, the floor and the drywall. Again, we take pride in how we store things, how we keep things organized and clean, to make sure that little small problems don't become big problems. When it comes to fasteners, nails and screws are used to attach the gypsum board in both single and multiply installation. Also, they use clips and staples are used only to attach the base layer in multiply construction. The base layer will be the first sheet you put up. So the clips holds the panels together. Special drywall adhesive can be used to secure single-ply gypsum boards to framing, furring, masonry, and concrete, or to laminate a face ply to a base layer of gypsum boards or other base materials. Adhesive must be supplemented with some type of mechanical fastener, such as nails or screws. We never just glue it and walk away. Never. Fasteners should be placed at least 3/8 from the board edge and ends. Fasteners must be used with, let me go back to that statement. The fasteners should be used at least 3/8. We don't want it too close to the edge. If it is, it can actually break the ends of that drywall edge. So we want to go back at least 3/8. We don't go too far back because there may be too much play. We don't want to go too close because it can damage the plasterboard. So fasteners must be used with the correct shield, guard, or attachment recommended by the manufacturer. So we're looking at what the manufacturer calls. So nails depth should be no less than 1/32 of an inch. So if you look at this picture, this is a drywall nail, and you can see that it just slightly tapered underneath. So again, we use a nail. And the hammer we talked about earlier, that hammer has a concave edge and is kind of serrated. So when you hammer, it will countersink that nail. It will countersink the nail. Angular and cupped head nails are acceptable for gypsum board applications. Care should be taken not to drive it in too hard because we can damage the drywall. It would be a weak spot. So that nails might be there, but it's not holding anything securely. Remember that gypsum board is a pretty soft material. Ensure local codes and fire regulations are followed. Now here's placing the nails in a gypsum board. Again, we want to make sure it's secure. It's not loose. There's no play. So again, when it's on 16 on center, the walls, we put about 16 inches apart. And then for ceilings, we're using every 12 inches apart. Because the ceiling, the weight is always pushing downward. We want to make sure that drywall is secured to that ceiling correctly. Okay, if it's 24 inches on center for the framing, then for walls and ceilings, we're going to put it at 12 inches. So you can see that, I'll show you a couple pictures here. Again, we look at the edge where there's two edges together. These are the two end edges, and the 3/8 from the edge from each center. So in other words, 3/4 inch apart from one nail to the other, because 3/8 from this side, 3/8 from that side would give us 3/4. So that will hold that seam together. And then we space out everything else. These are 16 on centers across. And if you notice, it's got a pretty straight row going across. You eyeball it. It don't have to be perfectly there, but close to it. But we're going to space it again. Just spacing it. Again, maximum ceilings and walls. Spacing it. Okay, we look at placing the wall studs and how we're going to nail it, and looking at the ceiling and how we're going to attach the drywall. We want to make sure all the seams are there. So here with a ceiling, what they're showing the difference, They actually put a board, like a 2x4, where the wall and the floor joists or ceiling joists are located. Um, and so this board where you can rest um, your gypsum board against and be able to put nails here. If you didn't do that, there will be a weak spot and it will actually probably end up cracking in that corner at the ceiling because there's nothing holding it. So we must make sure that when we attaching that everything is straight. Again, nailing, putting the dimple in, countersinking it. Make sure it's solid dead center of the that stud, that structural member, and again, it should be straight in. This is kind of like a toenail at this point right here. Of course, we missed it there. You may be trying to find, if you miss it, pull that nail out of there, fix the hole, but make sure you get it correctly. Dead center, and it need to be countersink again. Using screws, of course, screws these days is more popular. Usually the screws we use will be a flathead, and it could be a coarse or self-tapping. The difference is if you're using for metal studs or if you're using for wood studs. They both drywall screws, but for metal studs have a self-tapping end so it can drill into the metal very easily. So drywall screws are used to attach gypsum board to wood or steel framing or to other gypsum boards. Um, a screw gun should be used and held perpendicular to the work. In other words, going straight into that stud, not at an angle, but straight in, because we can miss it. It could be a weak joint. Is a floating interior angle construction. And I want you, before we go into that, I want you to take a look how they did this. They got one board here, a panel, and they got two here. So like I said, they staggering the seams. The floating angle method may be used for either the single layer or double layer application of gypsum board to wood framing. I said this method helped eliminate nail popping and corner cracking, which will happen if it's not done correctly. Again, we take a look at this diagram, and you can see if it's double, we kind of stagger the edges again. We don't want to put them on top of each other. We want to make sure that it's not causing any cracks or separation. So floating interior angle construction, and you can see in the diagram here where it showing you how the ceiling is done first, then the walls is there, but putting a support there because at this point it's floating because there's nothing supporting this edge. But you can put a block there. Either two ways you can do it, but something that you can use to help do it because when you're building walls, this may not be where your joists are located. And so you could put something there to help support it. Again, we talk about adhesives again. We put it on the framing or furring or masonry walls to be able to help hold the boards securely. But we still use some type of mechanical connections like nails or screws. Okay, when we're using adhesive, we use caulking guns. These are different types, and typically you can buy larger caulking guns that will hold a lot more material, so you're not going through a lot of tubes. So it comes pneumatic, which is a lot easier, run off of air pressure. Of course, they make battery-powered ones these days that you You just plug a battery into it, and it will be able to do it without you um, using all the strength in your hands. And of course, there's the mechanical one where you got the handle that you squeeze. These just got a trigger. You pull, and it will just feed, and it will feed nicely until you're done. Dry powder adhesive. Um, these adhesives are used to laminate gypsum boards to each other, to suitable masonry or concrete surfaces. Again, adhesive is something to attach. Um, you should only mix enough adhesive that can be used within the working time recommended. If not, you're going to be wasting a lot of materials. So again, some old houses used to not put any insulation in the house, especially if it was a brick house. And they would just plaster right over the, the masonry, the block or brick in the house. And so if somebody wanted to put drywall to make the wall look better, you can actually just glue it to it and just putting the adhesive on the walls. So drywall adhesive again required permanent mechanical fasteners, at least at the perimeter of all the boards applied to the walls, ceilings, and soffits. These may be used to laminate gypsum boards to each other. Disadvantages includes the inability to use and to fill irregulars between the surfaces, irregularities because of it just made it just since it's glued to the wall. Um, it's once it's finished, it's stuck to it. You're gonna have to damage it to take it off. Which leaves some of the areas without adhesive bond. Um, so again, if you glue it into a wall where there's gaps and things, you may not actually physically touch it. Most of these adhesives do not permit moving of the boards once the contact has been made. So you got to be careful. If it's like the air dry contact adhesive, they make an industrial spray. You can spray it on the walls and on the board. Once it touches, it's stuck. It's not coming off. So you don't got no working time. So this just gives you some information about um, looking at the SDS sheets, material safety data sheets for any precautions. Because if it's like I say, industrial contact, um, the, the the vapors that comes off of is pretty strong, and also it is flammable. And so just make sure that you're in a well ventilated area while you're working on it. But read the sheet so you know um, and the precautions what you must adhere to. Modified contact adhesive, another type. These adhesives provide a longer placement time, allowing the boards to be repositioned if necessary. And the design for attaching wall boards to all types of supporting construction, such as solid walls, other gypsum boards, and other various insulating boards, including rigid foam boards, which is probably the most popular because you can insulate the walls first with the structural foam boards without damaging it because those structural boards, the wrong adhesive actually eats it up. So it may be used to securing drywall materials and panels to steel studs. And this will give you an idea of how to attach it. So in other words, they just run a bead. Matter of fact, here you can see that they're using two beads, or you can just put in a serpentine. So in other words, going back and forth like a snake on that stud, and that will hold it also. So it might be quicker than trying to run 2 beads, but you can do it pretty quick. And every other stud will have just one seam of adhesive going down it. So give you what the ideal of this type of adhesive is, like liquid nails. Basically, that's what it is. Again, ceiling installation requires supplemental fasteners in the field as well as on the perimeter, where fasteners and vertical joints are undesirable. Gypsum panels may be bowed, pre-bowed. In other words, um, if they are um, looking at how, matter of fact, using gypsum board in an arch, um, let's say it's an archway in a doorway, and you can actually pre-bow it so it can help fit in that area. So again, just fitting the um, the boards in a way that it secures by using adhesive and mechanical screws. Looking at the adhesive for application for metal framing, again, this goes into this chart. Just look at what has been used, how to attach it, the metal spacing, and so forth. Um, but how to use the glue. Again, some cities, the codes require you to put it, some really don't care. But either way, main thing is that we secure those gypsum boards as well as possible. Gypsum boards panels can be applied directly to above grade interior masonry and concrete wall surfaces if the surface is dry, smooth, clean, and flat. Gypsum boards can be applied directly to exterior cavities, walls, if the cavities are properly insulated. So pre-finished gypsum boards should not be laminated to concrete or masonry. So again, because it has a finish on it, it can separate, it can be damaged from that purpose. So base surfaces should always be clean to ensure that the adequate bond when you're gluing 2 sheets together. All right, you got some questions here. At which point, which the edge of the 2 panels of drywall meet is known as a blank, and is the joint. So when you put 2 pieces of drywall together is the joint. As a general rule, gypsum drywall should only be installed when the building temperature is greater than, again, like I say, you don't want to put drywall in when it's a cold environment, because it can expand or contract. It will contract when it's cold and expand when we get warm. It can absorb moisture in it when it's warming back up again, and have too much moisture content, which can cause mold to grow. So it is should be above 55 degrees. 55. Fasteners should be applied to wallboard working from blank. Fasteners should be applied to wallboards working from blank. Is top to bottom, edge to edge, center to center, corner to corner, and is center to edge. Fasteners should be applied to wallboard working from center to edge. And here's the reason why. You put it in the center to hold it flat, and then you can go to the edge. If you go, now here's a reason, now here's another thing. If you go to one edge, the other edge may come apart. It may fall. It may come loose. So in the center, you're holding both ends down. So again, start in the center and work your way out. Matter of fact, what I usually do, put in the center, go to one edge, then go to the other edge, then I can work. I could take my hands off of it, and you will be able to work with it. Next question says, when you are installing fire-rated wallboard, the nails should penetrate the studs by at least blank. At least blank. Now this going to the stud. So no matter what thickness of your drywall is, no matter what the thickness is, you want to be able to secure it and drive it into the wall to the stud. So again, if it's 1/2 inch drywall, you want to make sure that it goes into the wall 1 1/8 inch. And here's the funny thing, or it's not really funny, but a lot of drywall screw starts at 1 5/8 inch. 1 5/8 inch. So in other words, if you got a 1/2 inch drywall, add 1 1/8 inch to it, that gives you your 1 5/8 inch. So again, the shortest drywall you should be going with, unless you got metal studs, it's a little bit different. Metal studs are certainly it's is thin, and so we use a special screw for metal studs also. In a double nailing system, the second set of nails is driven about blank from the first. Is it 2 inches, 4 inches, 8 inches, or is it 12 inches? It is 2 inches. In single nailing floating interior angle construction, where the framing is perpendicular to the wall ceiling intersection, the ceiling fastener should be located blank from the intersection. So again, in a single nailing floating interior angle construction, where the framing is perpendicular to the wall ceiling intersection, the ceiling fasteners should be located blank from the intersection. And the answer is, so here the answer is 7 inches. 7 inches.